let's say I get approached from an external candidate on LinkedIn who is
Yep.
interested in working for us, and I look at the profile and say, well, you would fit into that particular area. I can introduce you to a
Right.
subject matter expert there. And very often the response is, currently I'm not having a position. Or I'm not really, and then I
Right.
think that's beyond
Yeah.
the point. That's not
Right.
the point. It's like, no, here's somebody. Well, of
Yeah.
course, you have to make a pre-selection. Is that candidate potentially a candidate to hire?
Yeah.
If there was an opening, would we be interested? And if the answer is yes,
Yeah.
then, schedule a call
Yeah.
and get to know that individual and
Yeah.
keep in touch. But I think then again, there is this, of course, the daily pressure. My calendar is full. I don't really have time
Yeah.
for that. I think that's a mistake because there will be the time when you are looking for colleagues, and then it's great to have a list of potential candidates that you've been in touch with. So I think that every leader who actually manages people and sometimes has to hire new people should have a bit of a recruiter mindset.
All right, welcome to another episode of Lead for Performance. I'm thrilled to welcome Martin Drux, who's joining us from Germany today to the podcast studio. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Great being here.
Awesome. I'm excited for this conversation, and especially leaning on your extensive global experience working in leadership and performance across the globe. So definitely looking to learn from you today. So let's just jump in. How does managing and working cross culturally in a multinational dynamic shape how you think about performance and leadership?
Well, so in my role, we are looking after clients that are multinational that are operating around the world, and we have teams and offices in I think over 130 countries. So with that, of course, you have to have a very open mindset in terms of
Hmm.
different cultures, different time zones, different languages. I mean, of course, we are all communicating in English, but English is not the natural, let's say, the first or mother tongue for many of my colleagues, including
Hmm.
myself. So yeah, that requires more, I would say, cultural sensitivity, open-mindedness. You can't take for granted in a way that you would do maybe if you were just operating in a single culture, single country environment.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like how you called it out, even yourself, right? So your English is your second language; it's mine as well. So even just having an understanding how that's already a little leap forward out of your natural flow is already helpful, right? We all have our diversity that
Yeah.
we work with going forward. Hmm. So does it going then looking at expanding some of those differences between the teams? How does let's say when we look at performance, maybe looking at burnout, or how does that differ depending on your cultural, expectations or infusions of thinking from different parts of the world?
Burnout, even though I'm part of a multinational network, I think that the teams are still within their own countries, within their own settings. So
Hmm.
there isn't a global perspective on it. So I think that the risk of burnout is, of course, everywhere.
Is
Some
global.
countries, the countries that we have burnout because of maybe the risk of burnout because of shortage of staff and resources.
Hmm.
In other countries, there is a risk of burnout because of the work environment. I was just returned from Asia, and in Asia, I think there's potentially a bigger risk because there's still this work ethics of very long hours, very hard working.
Right.
So in the multinational environment, there is a person. I mean, being based in Europe is kind of like a blessing because most of the time when we have global calls, we agree to have them somewhere around midday European time. But
Hmm.
I guess that when you are based in Australia and Japan, or maybe on the West Coast, that's usually when you are at the end. So you may be expected to work longer hours, stay longer, or get up earlier. So that
Hmm.
it's another layer of it, but I would say
Right.
that the general question of burnout still is very much a local one.
Yeah. And I like that. I mean, it's a good perspective. So burnout is global. There are some logistic layers of connecting global teams we have to take care of, even just like time zones. But then there's also some of these drivers that are different, though, within a country, depending on either some logistic obstacles or the cultural influences. And you shared how, in Asian countries maybe makes them more more susceptible
Yeah.
to that. That's an interesting, it starts to, start to introduce some interesting considerations when working with such teams. Do you find though we're treating it though as an individual challenge? Although the first thing we share is how it's everywhere, but we are still. My view is that a
Mhm.
lot of organizations are looking at it as a personal failing versus some sort of a systemic issue that we might actually be facing as a human race.
Yeah, I don't, not because I mean it affects individuals, but I would say in the corporate world, there is of course that permanent drive for revenue growth, better in NOI, and then also maybe achieving that with less resources. So the pressure
The pressure,
on
yeah,
people comes, it could be a systematic. Of course, a burnout can be an individual issue as well. I mean, think about maybe you have somebody you have to look after in a private
yeah,
environment, you have to go through some other personal issues. So I think it is, in that sense, individual, but we should not fool ourselves. I would say in a corporate world, there is a systematic risk of burnout
yeah,
that
yeah.
comes
Okay, that's exactly
from
that's
increased pressure influences, never like oh, and I need to grow. Can I have three more headcounts? So no, it's most of the times like work a bit harder.
mhm,
Be more efficient.
nope,
Yeah, but I wouldn't generalize it. So I think that there could be individual factors, but from a leadership perspective, I
yeah.
think we should always look at the risk of systematic,
Yeah. Yep,
pressure.
that's right, separating. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's a good way to look at it, I think, for sure, to recognize that there's both sides, right? So systemic
Mhm.
pressure to deal with, and then individual circumstances as well. Person really has to master kind of both to succeed sustainably. What are some of the symptoms that you look at, either systemically or individually, when you work with teams in different countries that you see that you can help them understand? Is it a systemic issue? Is it an individual issue? And, when somebody's to help either the group or individuals realize that they're approaching an unsustainable way of working and to help going forward.
So in my role, of course, I am in most countries. So I have my own team, but my
Hmm.
own team is mostly based in or is based in Europe, and
Hmm.
that's a rather small team. So I have 7, 8 people reporting to me. But that is, of course, I need to approach as a leader, as a personal manager. But then there is a matrix structure. So we have 35
Hmm.
teams in the region. And I would say I'm an additional pair of eyes and ears. And what I would see is, in general, it starts normally with an increase in maybe concerns about the service quality, the responsiveness,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then that's when I engage with the local leadership and say, okay, what might be the issue? And sometimes it is very very often it comes out that we two people left or somebody's on sick leave and now others have to catch up. So usually it starts with a let's say a business issue or maybe a complaint
Right.
and escalation. But then there is a local manager who of course has to be more hands on and be because they see the team every day
Hmm.
or at least several times a week. So, but we need, I would say, various leaders looking at it from different angles. But my role would be really more in terms of escalation. That I look at. Okay, that there seems to be something going wrong. Is that a temporary issue, or is it an individual issue, or systematic?
Yes. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Looking at the business outcomes, which is great.
Mhm.
Ultimately, always a good answer in business, right? To look
Mhm.
at business outcomes. What can we do better? What's in the way of the outcomes that we are looking to seek, right? So that's
Yeah.
a key indicator. And then looking behind the scenes on whether exactly it's like a point in time issue, systemic issue, or individual issue requires different kinds of solutions.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
But I'm
Actually, I
checking
really
in. I'm just
sorry.
checking in with the leaders in the organization on a regular basis, just to because
Yes.
if you are reacting when there is an escalation, it might be too late, right? So I think it's
Yes.
also important to have a regular check-in to say because some people are covering things, and they keep on working harder and harder and harder. And by the time you see that there is an issue, it might already been too late. So it's important to engage in an early stage to make sure that we are approaching a situation.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is one of the things that's a theme that keeps coming up. Like we can't wait for some of these patterns in a reactive mode. We have
Mm.
to be more proactive to recognize just the reality that some of this has on the individuals, the team, and then ultimately on the outcomes as well. So,
Mhm.
very good point. It's a balance of proactive and then reactive, reactively addressing them. I like that you brought up a few times this working hard mentality. This is something I know my team has been discussing, and I a lot on how there's this like fundamental thought that I work hard, I will get more results. I work harder, I will get better results. And we go to this line of thinking automatically. And of course, the world is asking us more and more to get things done, more for less. The organizations want things more and faster. So this, to me, seems like it contributes to the idea that unsustainable performance, the burnout, disengagement, these really costly metrics that we're seeing. Is there so I think from your answers, I see that you're seeing this working harder mentality, but is there a shift needed that working harder, yes, gets good results, but at some point it's diminishing returns? So we have to really change how we are thinking about this. Is that how does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I would say throughout my career, things have shifted in a way that
Yeah,
I remember when I started, it was still kind of like showing off with how long you have stayed in the office last night and how early you got in the
right.
office. And I had to come back. Now it has changed a little bit because now we have more work from home, more hybrid working. So the whole thing about, staying late in the office is somewhat strange if you could also work long hours at home or something like that. So that showing off part has shifted. No, but I also see that the whole topic has been introduced, that we have a bit more of a balance of work life and personal life.
Yeah,
It's basically the factor of having friends, family, hobbies, time to cool down and have different things. At least that topic has arisen. So
right.
the pressure is still there, but the topic
Yes.
is being addressed more. And also, what I see is there are many efforts to make work more efficient. So we have a lot of operation teams looking at how is the workflow does one person have to do everything by themselves, or can we actually delegate some of these tasks away? How do we use artificial intelligence or technology to really make work more efficient? Of course, the risk is always there. The moment you free up time, you have more expectations coming on
Yeah.
top. I
Yes.
think that pressure is always there. We need to balance it, but yeah, that's
I think that's a good view. Absolutely. I like that idea that it's being introduced, that we're thinking about or challenging that default way of thinking. And all of these opportunities come with it's like a double-edged sword sometimes, right? So you can work from home, so that's good for balance, right? Saves me travel time, etc. But also then, like you said, it's like, oh, well, then it's easy to just jump on computer and work when you wouldn't normally do that, right? So it's
Mhm.
like we have to be very careful with these new ways of working again, and to kind of challenge that idea that just working constantly and more is always going to get us better results. We know that it's not true, but this is a bit of a trap for
yeah.
humans, right?
I think that culture has changed a little bit, but I still think because people are individuals. So I never liked the idea of working long hours in the office or something like that, because at some stage your brain is at capacity, and
Yes.
you need to have a change of scenery. If you're not so interesting, like there's a new I think prime minister in Japan, and I think there were news about it that she only sleeps 2 to 3 hours a night. And I think that by any medical advice, that's not healthy. I mean, some people can do
Right.
less, but 2 to 3 hours, that doesn't sound human. But there might still be a system, or still be an understanding that no, resting, taking a break, sleeping is for lazy people.
Right.
And I think that is something that we need to change, because if you look at high performers, I think there's one person comes to mind is a football player, Robert Lewandowski, who I think he plays for Barcelona now, and he has a sleep coach. And I heard that he
Mhm.
has a sleep regimen that he's playing. He's approaching 40. He's still playing at top level professional soccer,
Yeah.
and sleeping is part of his training. So he makes sure that he gets a
Okay.
minimum of 7 or 8 hours of sleep in a certain setting that has no distraction, sound, noise at a certain temperature. So I think we need to change the mindset that really sleeping, resting, and taking a break is part of high performance. It's not something that only lazy people do. No, you will
Yes.
actually collapse or get a heart attack. I mean, you know.
How productive is that? Like, it's like, yeah. I love that line of, I really like that, Martin. That's absolutely kind of the same. It's like we have to switch our thinking from I just have to work harder, I'll get better, to more
Mhm.
thinking I have limited capacity. My brain has limited capacity day by day. I have to choose how best to invest it so that I'm getting results day by day. Is
Mhm.
one, it's a mindset shift. Now you brought up another one. It's like the sleeping or recharging, resting, taking a break, walking in nature. Those things are not lazy. They're productive. Actually, they're also productive. It's just that productivity for humans can look different at different times. And it's that inherent balance in a way that works for us that is really going to lead us to sustainable performance. But I know that you agree with this line of thinking, but it's like there's two or three big mindset traps there that humans are not naturally good at. And that's to me is like these conversations that are percolating are really important so that we are all like, especially, leaders that are talking about this, opening up a new line of thinking that pushes this forward, this new messaging that's going to actually serve us better. I know switching gears a little bit. I know that you're really passionate about getting business leaders more involved in HR topics. I was wondering just if you want to talk to us a little bit about that. Absolutely. To me, it always looks like every function should be super focused on business outcomes. And there definitely seems to be a bit of a disconnect. And I know that you spend time in this talking about this. So just how do you think about this connection on outcomes and how it can serve people and organizations better?
So, as a business leader, there is of
Hmm.
course an element of HR in every leader's job, which is basically performance review and bonuses and
Yeah.
salary raise and promotions and all this stuff. But that's not so much what I'm talking about. What I think is really about employer branding and recruitment of people and attracting talent to the company and so on. And the reason that I see a need for business leader to engage is that why do you join a company? It's not because of somebody in HR. No disrespect to my wonderful people in HR,
Right.
but they want to know how are the
Mm,
managers like? What is the company
mm,
culture like? And so I personally have started to establish through mentoring and through being active talking about leadership topics on LinkedIn and social media and podcasts.
mhm,
So I'm engaging with people that want to know more about it. And so I have
mhm,
at any given time a talent funnel of 20, 30 people that I'm in regular contact with, some internally, some externally, talking about leadership ideas, talking about the industry and so on. And I think that's something that is really important for companies to attract the best talent, to be seen as a good employer, and that
mhm,
has to come really from the business side. HR can support, but it's really something that is very important to me is that I'm visible as a manager, as a leader, that people can look at, okay, what is it? What would it be like to work at that company? So what do they represent?
yeah. I like that view. That's a really good view. I personally resonates with me very well. Just to give you an example, in my last corporate role, I was VP of IT within a retailer, like a retail organization. So you're very right. Like it's like when if I was attracting people to work on in IT technical team, it's very different. I'm tracking developers, analysts, those roles that, multiple roles that create a technical and business transformation team. It's very different from HR's focus on hiring for the retail operations primarily, because that's
Mm.
like the lion's share of the organization that's the correct focus. But that's not necessarily going to work for my specific roles. And that example probably works for most functions, right? So I think that that's a really good point, that it needs to be that business leaders need to all be involved in this so that they're really getting the right people for the right role even though it's within the one company, right? Extend to you. So what is, let me, so before I switch over, sorry, does that, what stops this from being a practice? Like what's the obstacle to this positive line of thinking?
I guess that it's tradition. So,
Tradition.
because traditionally there have been tasks in certain silos.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
same thing is, by the way, I think that business leaders should also be very much engaged in marketing communication because,
Okay.
again, it's like, we are the face of the company. We
Yeah.
are the ones that. Why do people want to work for us or work with us? That's
Mhm.
really the colleagues, the business leaders. So what stops us from that is really the traditional way. So it's,
Yeah.
let's say I have my day-to-day job, and I know it's in claims or it's in
Yeah.
broking or underwriting, whatever it is. And then I meet a new colleague. Then I get the approval for an additional headcount, and then I go to HR and say, okay, HR, please find me someone.
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
and I think that's where the disconnect is. So I think it's just a traditional way, and
Yeah.
especially I'm working in an industry that is not really known for fast moving change, and it's very
Right.
traditional. It's very conservative. It's kind of also risk adverse. I think that's the long and short of it. It hasn't been done like that in the past, so maybe
Yeah.
people haven't thought of it that way.
Yeah, that's why we're having these conversations. I mean, I could totally see that. There's so many, we have to just look at things differently. But of course, the human brain, again, likes everything to stay how it is the same. So this is one of the barriers, right? To making even positive improvements,
So
like you were
sometimes I
suggesting.
see, for instance, let's say I get approached from an external candidate on LinkedIn who
Yeah,
is interested in working for us. And I look at the profile and say, well, but you would fit into that particular area. I can introduce you to a
right.
subject matter expert there. And very often the response is, currently, I'm not having a position. Or I'm not really, and then I
Right.
think that's beyond
Yeah.
the point. That's not
Right.
the point. It's like, no, here's somebody. Well, of
Yeah.
course, you have to make a pre-selection. Is that candidate potentially a candidate to hire?
Yeah.
If there was an opening, would we be interested? And if the answer is yes,
Yeah.
then, schedule a call
Yeah.
and get to know that individual and
Yeah.
keep in touch. But I think
Yeah.
then again, there is this, of course, the daily pressure. My calendar is full. I don't really have time
Yeah.
for that. I think that's a mistake because there will be the time when you are looking for colleagues, and then it's great to have a list of potential candidates that you've been in touch with. So I think that every leader who actually manages people and sometimes has to hire new people should have a bit of a recruiter mindset in their.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a continuous, absolutely. Like, building a team and running a team and growing, hopefully growing a team is a continuous effort, right? And especially, as the workforce is getting more and more mobile, more and more global, more and more switching organizations, I think it makes sense to more proactively invest in that funnel as an ongoing basis, just not a point in time when the position
Mhm.
opens magically hope for the best candidate to just appear at that time, right? That's going to be
Right.
harder. That's your thinking, and I like again how you're bringing that too, also to marketing or communication. I would love to get your thoughts on also. Does that extend also into training, and the way we develop people into performance and leadership? Let's say, because likewise, I'm following. It could also be that same line of thinking. If hiring in the subject matter and with that person is going to be better, like better fit for the training aspects and preparations for the next level in leadership, the performance for what this phase of business, does that connection also have to be strengthened across HR and the leaders in business as well?
Yeah, I mean, training is a very broad, let's say, very broad subject. Of course, we have some mandatory corporate trainings that normally comes from HR. Let's say all this, like
Yeah,
compliance and what have you. But I think you're more referring to the individual training or the
yeah,
subject related training. That is the need for it is definitely coming from within the business. So that we say so for instance, multinational in our practice, we have developed a diploma
mhm,
when we have colleagues who want to work in multinational and want to advise multinational clients that they have to pass that diploma first in order to advise our clients. And another important part for me is also internal mentorship and coaching
yeah,
program. And I think
mm,
that's an important part. So that we really team up colleagues from different teams, generation, cultures, and really have them engage with each other. So we have introduced in multinational this year a mentorship program. I'm currently having three colleagues that I'm working with, looking at where they are right now, understanding where they want to go next, and give them also some ideas that I'm thinking on how to progress their careers. Definitely an important part. And of course, there is an effect that's kind of like the let's say cross mentoring. If you
Yep.
that for me is like so I've been doing internally and externally a lot around mentoring. Is that whenever you engage in that process, you're not like this old man on the mountain who's still sharing his wisdom, but you also learn a lot because you stay engaged with a maybe different generation, a different culture, and through that
Yep.
dialogue, you also grow. So I think that's a very important part of the overall strategy, people
Yes,
strategy.
I agree. Mentoring obviously is proven to be very, very powerful, driving learning and also engagement, right? Within like in strong one-on-one relationships, right? That's probably the gold standard for driving that engagement, and it makes totally sense. Your commitment to this. I wonder, how do you, on a bigger scale? To me, it's always a challenge with mentoring. Becomes about scaling, systemizing, and certainly when you're talking now globally, right? Like different
Mhm.
kinds of, again, barriers and opportunities. So how do you think, as you recognize such a big importance of mentoring in the overall development of the workforce, how do you think about, systemically building it out as a part of leadership approach and development versus kind of ad hoc opportunities at how it comes up, or locally, how it just comes up by itself?
So we took an approach in our practice. So that's across Europe, where
Hmm.
we try to identify a number of mentors and mentees and match them. And then in terms of scale, I think, so I said three, that's really the top end for a
Yep.
period of a year. And then I think within that time, so probably connecting once or twice a month. So that is kind of like the scale
Hmm.
that we do on a regional basis. But then, of course, that's just one practice. I think where it has to be done, maybe in country, maybe on a broader scale. There is some ad hoc mentoring, so some because at mentoring could be a lot of things. It's like by the time
Yeah.
you meet for with a colleague for a coffee every once in a while, you might be mentoring someone without even knowing it. So
Hmm.
when I
Yes.
was when I was younger, I had lots of mentors, but it wasn't called mentoring. It was just senior guys
Yeah.
who would
Having a coffee.
take me under their
Yeah.
wings and help me and so on.
Yes.
So I think that it's really more about a mindset that we share knowledge, we share wisdom in different ways. That's a cultural thing, and then it can be done in a structured program. It can be done. So I had one colleague. Who reached out to me and it said like, could you be my mentor? And we just said put basically a call in our diaries once a month or something like that, and we catch up and so on. So it's a more informal way too.
Yeah.
That's what. But I think it's a cultural mindset, and also come back to what we said in the earlier section about I don't have the time to talk to somebody if I don't have
Yeah.
a job opening. I think freeing up time for these areas is important. It's really because if you don't do it, if you don't see it, okay, this is something that really brings mutual value and so on. You say, "Oh, it is part of my overall work,"
Yeah.
then you probably never have time for it. So, but on the other hand, if you have mandatory trainings from the company, if you have to do a year-end performance review and so on, you have to make time for all of this. So I just think that you just schedule something that you
Yeah.
look after talent one two that but it becomes part of your role
Yeah.
and you need to schedule it.
Yes, I totally agree. And then you're right. It comes back to that first part of our conversation, also to the second part. It's that mindset. We have to see mentoring as productive, being productive, right? And I totally agree with that. I don't think well, sorry, I don't think, I wonder if we incentivize that or make that clear to people enough, especially in like team lead or manager roles, that is a huge part of your job, right? Your role is going to be about providing clarity, driving engagement, and ultimately the performance of your team. And that time with them directly is critical. Have you seen that be somehow measured and made clear and then measured as a part of role, like really your role?
No.
No.
I don't think I've seen it. It in my case it has developed at a personal level. So I have
Yes.
to say I've been very blessed throughout my career with having people meaning well and
Mhm,
really developing me, helping me,
mhm,
grow. And so
mhm,
for I've seen it firsthand. I think that we see some mentorship programs that I mentioned before being introduced, so it becomes it, but I
mhm.
haven't seen it as so much as as really something that has been expressively said in the role in the job description that mentoring should be part of your role. Of course, if you're a team manager, if you're a people manager, you have certain obligations to develop colleagues and
Right.
to grow them. But I think more could be done definitely in terms of
Yeah.
making it systematic. But having said that, we also need to be realistic that not everyone has the talent or really an interest in doing that. So I'm not sure you can force somebody
Yes.
to
No,
be a
fair.
mentor
Yeah.
because you don't want to have somebody that okay, so now I've been assigned to be your mentor, Sandra. So
Yeah.
what do you want to talk about? And I have only 10 minutes time. So that doesn't help. So there has to
It's
be
not helpful.
certain level of empathy and interest. And I can only encourage people to try it because it's extremely rewarding if you
Mhm.
see that somebody changes maybe course of direction because you put a thought into their head or you give them a confidence. I mean, one is very interesting. So last year I started joining a mentorship program with a university in Japan. One of my mentees, I had a conversation. One thing that resonated with him is that in Japan there is a culture of perfection and don't
Mhm.
be a nuisance to society or anyone else, keep a low profile and don't make mistakes.
Mhm.
And I said that, yeah, that's great, but nobody is perfect. Especially if you start learning,
Yeah.
you have to make mistakes in order to grow.
Yeah.
Think about learning an instrument, learning a language. Do you make mistakes? Of course you do make
Of
mistakes.
course. Mhm.
And if you get want to be better, you make mistakes.
Mhm.
And that's what he said. Oh, that's from nobody probably in the Japanese culture might have explicitly said like embrace mistakes, make them once,
Yeah.
make them twice, but don't make them three times. So
Mhm.
learn from them, but
Mhm.
mistakes are natural. So and once you see that that is changing somebody's mindset, and all of a sudden they become more confident to try things and not be afraid of making mistakes or errors and grow. That's extremely rewarding.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I appreciate your thoughts on that as well. Thoughts on how you can't force people to mentor. Of course not. It has to be there. Yeah. And a skill, desire, creating space for it. Absolutely. Is there anything, but there is this link between manager and employee, right? Direct that controls this just clarity of purpose, objectives. That is just a part of a manager's job. If we look at that exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, and there's a part here that kind of crosses over into mentorship, which is kind of went down the line. But my guess is still that some managers are not making the time again to feed that connection that they're responsible for, like the that they're responsible for directly helping those team members achieve the right outcomes. They need some of this leadership from them, right? So how is there a line that you how do you see a line that's like, me as a manager, this is my responsibility to help here. As a mentor, I go up and beyond, but this part that's my job should be measured and clear to everybody.
Sure. And I
As a
would say that also traditionally mentor would not be the line manager in
no,
an ideal world
yes,
because you try to be away, but some of my best greatest mentors were actually my
yes,
bosses. So but it's a very good point in terms of if you're a line manager,
mhm,
your understanding should be that you're moving from I'm the boss and I'm telling you what to do to no, I'm actually been given the responsibility
yeah,
to foster your career,
oh,
to develop
yes,
you, and to make
mhm,
sure that you
mhm,
on one hand side perform. Of course, that's part of that, but at the same time, I need to invest into that into the relationship to make sure that you will grow as an individual, as a person.
mhm.
I think that really depends. I'm not sure that there's a general that's been really expressed so much. It should
Yeah,
be,
it should be. Yes,
but because very often it is a transactional thing, isn't it? Let's say your
yes,
team has a certain sales goal, and I'm the
yes,
manager. So if I take my role literally, I just look at achieving that goal, and I will push everyone to achieve that goal. Job done. But I think
Hmm.
as a people manager, you are being given a broader responsibility
Yes.
to beyond reaching that goal is also that you have individuals that have their own personal lives and ambitions, and you should not be a roadblock. You should be an enabler, and that's
Yeah.
something that is very very important. I mean, of course, one thing we do is doing global, let's say, employee surveys, employee
Hmm.
satisfaction surveys, and that also
Yes.
reflects on the leadership. So there will be an engagement with the leaders, especially the ones that get consistently poor reviews.
Right.
So there is some monitoring, some measuring, but I think it should really be articulated more in kind of like a mission statement of, what do you need to do to be a leader. It's not just getting the job done. It's like
Yes.
your some careers are being basically depend on you. And then you always hear this thing that people don't leave companies, they leave their managers. And I think that is
Yes.
something that is very, very important to be
Yeah.
to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, to me, that's exactly you nailed that. That's so insightful. We can't just be focused on the results. Just like you're talking about the way this to me sounds very similar to where you're talking about investing in, the recruiting part. Like it's not a point in time transaction of how you're now going to the market. You have to, it's building this funnel of interested people, giving and taking. And then when you have a need, that funnel is there for you and you are there. Yeah, and vice versa, right?
Mhm.
This to me is similar, like discussion about, it's not just as a manager, you're like, just, oh, get the result and that's got job well done. We have to be kind of building and like thinking about your team as a evolving, living asset workforce that has different challenges, ebbs and flows, and how you're enabling them to really succeed. Yes, for that result, but also in the bigger picture and then and especially looking at them as individuals and their true success, because then you're like look, grabbing bigger and bigger, but you can really benefits the group, obviously, but also the results. Ultimately, that's a more healthy way of looking at longer term sustainable performance and the role you have in it as a line manager.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. I think it's this is to me is a bit interesting discussion on looking at the starting from that we kind of traversed, but then also connected backwards. I like to give my guests a magic wand. So if there is a leader here that's listening to us that does not have all the experience that you have in leading and connecting global teams, what's the one thing that you would say to them to leave with them to pass on some of the experience and knowledge to encourage them. If there's one thing to pass on and make true today, what would you use your power on to make that happen?
So I mean that's a tough question because I would
Yes, I
say
could be.
the ability to work in this multinational global environment is of course a long process, right? You learn. I think the important part is that you approach everything with humanity and open mindedness. That's the one thing. So don't be too worried about making cultural mistakes or something like that, but be genuine and be open to learn. So I'm not quite sure if there is, if you gave me a magic wand, there's one thing that I could give people, but I would say as one advice is to be to to embrace, be open minded. But then I also say that within that multinational environment, usually it attracts people that already have this kind of
Hmm.
curiosity and
Right.
because yes, we are very different around the world as people, but we are all human beings, we're all people. So I think
Yes.
as long as you approach everyone as a genuine authentic individual, then you will get very good results.
Yeah. Well, I think
But
that that's always
disappointing,
good
did I
advice.
waste the magic wand here?
No, absolutely not. Because to me, that's what I was gonna say. No, I think it's really good advice, and it's interesting that to get that highlighted because there's 1,000 things you can say. That's why the magic wand is a trick because it asks you to prioritize, right? The top what goes to the
Yeah.
top. But I would say that it's interesting that you pick such a general trait to focus on. But I think it's important. I think it's such an important one, especially in this day and age where we need more of that. And you're right, like the people that are in these roles are naturally open to that, but to share and to double down that that is the most important thing to get us moving in the right direction, I think is absolutely not a waste of the magic wand ever.
Okay. Yeah. And I
Thank
can
you
also
so
say
much,
that,
Martin.
and I think that also traveling and getting out is super important. So
Yes.
give you one example. So when we go to international conferences, internally, externally, you always see people sticking to their own kind. the people that
Hmm.
they know. That's very human, I think. That's like, you
Yes.
go somewhere, you're uncomfortable, you don't know anybody, you stick to you. But
Yes.
it's so much more fun to actually, when I go to a conference, to meet people that I haven't seen in person yet, or I haven't seen in a long
Mm,
time. And you will never find me, and in my case, in just hanging in a German corner. So I think that's also important, is really to embrace it. I've been now in Japan, and in Japan, it's of course an island and a very, very long and long-standing traditional culture, and
mhm,
people follow certain strict social norms and rules. Uh, but then, especially to my Japanese friends, I always say, like, you can be very proud of everything you achieve in this beautiful country, but get out sometimes and
mhm. Yep.
go to the chaotic streets of Bangkok or Mumbai, or or get travel in other parts of the world where things
Yeah.
are completely different, and embrace the difference and see that the world is so diverse.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. That's just that's and exactly like it's beautiful. It's the learning, that learning mindset, right? And appreciating the differences and then always learning and picking up new examples that you can make your own after. And then again, experience new things and keep that open mindedness and curiosity. Beautiful outcomes come from that. That's a beautiful way to end this discussion. Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing for your time and sharing your experience with our audience today. I'm sure that it was helpful.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.